Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about domain-driven design. So let's get into it. So the question in question is, hi Frederick, I've read Eric Evans' domain-driven design. Do you know what Eric Evans means by if programmers aren't interested in the domain to learn and learning principles behind new features, the project will never arrive at a point where powerful new features unfold as corollaries to all other features. Uh, no, that's a new word for me, but yeah, I think I can answer that. But I mean, Eric Evans can speak for speak for himself. So this is the difference between being a code monkey and being a business-minded or like a real professional software developer, or not necessarily a professional software developer, but someone who is of true value to the company. It's the ideal software developer. Because the problem is that the code monkey mindset of a software developer means that usually you don't actually learn the business that you are dealing with, and that can also be translated in many cases, not exactly, but in many cases it's almost a byword for the domain of the company that you are dealing with. That means that if you don't take the time to learn how the company operates its domain, or how the domain looks, how are the stakeholders of the domain and how they use the domain, how they think about the domain, all this sort of stuff, the likelihood of you being able to predict what to write right now and then make sure that that thing is going to flow very nicely into new feature developments and sort of, I'm not saying you should never like try to be clever if you unless you're really sure about yourself, but there are different ways of implementing something. You can implement things without giving a shit about the domain and like the overall vision and future of the project, how it's going to unfold further down the line. And if you do that, everything that comes after is going to be harder and harder because you're not developing things with the mindset that you're going to get to some type of end state. Imagine if you are a builder and you're trying to, I don't know, help out on a construction project and you didn't give a shit about learning what you're actually building. You're just hammering stuff, or you're just sawing or doing things like that. You don't even know what you're building. The odds of you being a meaningful contributor and actually making sure that you spot things that are not helping the end vision or things like that, well, as you can imagine, if your mental picture of what you're building is, I don't know, a shed, and then it turns out that, hey, I'm actually working on a skyscraper, I just never took the time to learn that that was the thing that I was building, you are very unlikely to be effective. And it's actually more likely that a lot of the times that when you think that you're being clever, like when you do your work, you're actually going to design the software or the domain in such a way that makes future work harder. And that's why it's so. This is one of the reasons why I claim that software developers have to have a fair amount of brains, but also communication skills, because the essence of what you do is that you take something, usually a physical process or something like that, and you make it into a digital thing. That is what you're doing. And in order for you to do that effectively, you have to understand what it is that you're dealing with. And it's not like you're going to be a master. I mean, as an example, if you work with medical systems or finance or something like that, you're never going to be a doctor maybe, or like an investor or something like that, but you have to learn enough about the way that these people do work so that you can understand what it is their need is and what they need their systems to do. And that means understanding their domain to a certain point, so that you can make a digital representation of the problem domains that they have that fits nicely into whatever end vision they have, as an example. Because if you don't understand the domain, you might be optimizing for things that are very silly and don't actually help all that much. And this is one of the main things that the philosopher programmers always do, which is what makes them so dangerous for a project, because they don't usually focus on the problem domain of the company, or what the company or the people, their customer, what they actually need. They care about themselves. They care about how they want the product to be, or they want to use a special tool or a special technique or something like that. And what happens is that they are happy right now, right here, right now, when they can play around and be experimental and do something that is really like basically get paid to fuck around with what they want. But it hurts the end system, and like potentially hurts the future vision of what the company wants to achieve, because their focus is not to help the company reach end goals and like further like continuous stable development process. Their focus is themselves. And that is at least my interpretation of what Eric Evans means when he says that, well, if you don't learn the principles behind the domain, future feature development is going to get difficult. That much I can tell you. So what I want you to take away from this is that usually, or that's my interpretation, when you say that when a person, like when Eric Evans, you can read his book, Domain Driven Design. It's a very good book. I would go as far as to say that it's like one of two, and the other one being Clean Code. These books, every single software developer on the planet needs to read, because like these are the I would say most fundamental pieces of literature we have for every programming language. It's how most of modern IT works. So you should take a look at that. And when the section that talks about domain, the domain language, and learning the principles behind that domain in order for new features to sort of flow into the old ones and not cause a lot of like repetitive work and churn and so forth, it really comes down to that if you have an end goal in mind, it's easier for you, once you understand how actually all these things work, to get there, because you understand the means of how you're getting there. An example I like to say, make the analogy of like a ship. If you know how to sail a ship and you know where the island is that you want to get to, it's easy for you to maneuver towards that goal. But if you don't have any idea of how to maneuver the ship, but you don't care how to navigate, and you don't even know where the island is, you're just going to go in circles. And odds are that you're never going to get to where you need to be. And that is even more dangerous when you start adding code, because as I was saying, if you're building a skyscraper, for example, but you never take the time to understand what type of skyscraper you're building, well, then maybe like halfway through you start making decisions that actually doesn't fit into the end vision, and all of a sudden the whole thing collapses because you didn't take the time to actually figure out what was needed in order to get to the higher stories of the building. It's the same thing. You as a software developer, you have to take the time to understand your domain, so that when you develop the software for the feature you are working on, well, they have to be made with like the perspective of that they're going to fit into future work. And if you don't understand that domain, it's going to be really hard for you to understand what future work might come down the line, and how to make sure that the system can handle and accommodate those changes. Have a great day.